The next issue, in order of preference, was the lawsuits against the township. The first lawsuit, and I think the focus has been on lawsuits that have been filed either by the mayor or her husband. I'm just going to present the facts. I'm not going to give you my viewpoints on this, but I know people want to know what it is and what's going on. I've annotated, although the annotation is not coming through, but this lawsuit was dismissed. This was a lawsuit brought by Mr. Asdal against the Chester Township. It was amended to add the zoning officer, Dory Fox, the township engineer, John Hanson, the Board of Adjustment, the Planning Board. It was originally against Mr. Alsteed and his properties. The issue arose out of damage that was alleged to 76 Route 24, which is the property immediately next to this property, Mr. Alsteed's property, going the other way. The Asdals, and I say the Asdals because the property is jointly owned, 76 Route 24, alleged that there had been damage to the property and they wanted other relief in the form of changing some zoning issues, and they wanted money damages for the damage they had alleged to their property. The suit was dismissed on jurisdictional basis. The case is proceeding between Mr. Alsteed and Mr. Asdal in the before the County Agricultural Board, because, and I'm not going to get into the weeds on this either, but because Mr. Alsteed is a farmer, and under the Right to Farm Act, certain privileges attach, and if there are invasion of those privileges, it has to be addressed first by the County Agricultural Board. Depending on what the outcome is there, certain aspects of this suit could be reinstituted, do not have to be reinstituted, may not be reinstituted, but they could be. So right now there is no lawsuit on this particular case. By way of background, the township was defended by an attorney appointed by the insurance company. We paid a deductible. I'll get into the numbers later. Very minimal deductible. And the attorney's fees and costs were then paid by the insurance company. One thing that this did produce is because of the case against for example, the zoning official, Ms. Fox, we had to appoint a separate zoning official for anything involving Mr. Alsteed or Mr. Asdal. Likewise, as we will see in a minute, we had to appoint a separate engineer to the extent, although I don't think anything came up that we needed an engineer on, but if it did, we would have needed a separate engineer for anything concerning Mr. Alsteed or Mr. Asdal and that property. So yes, there were some costs. I do have the numbers from the town CFO. I will give you those numbers later. They are not exceptional, but yes, the township did have to incur costs to do them. If it comes back, who knows? All we can do is wait and see. But that case has been dismissed and is no longer pending. The other case that is still active is a case in tax court. Now, in New Jersey, New Jersey follows sort of an old English tradition. There is the Chancery Division, which is where you go if you want the court to order somebody to do something. There's the Law Division, where you go if you want money damages. That's where the last case was filed, because there were money damages involved. This case is in tax court. This is sort of a hybrid, because tax court addresses, in this situation, the township has found that certain properties owned by Mr. Alsteed that are contiguous to this property qualify for farm tax assessment. Mr. Asdal and Mrs. Asdal here have taken exception to that ruling by the tax assessor, and therefore they have gone to court to attempt to overturn that assessment. I'm not going to get into strategy or why they're doing it. It is what it is. But that case is still pending. I have read the complaint. As far as I can tell, there are no money damages sought. What they're trying to do is simply overturn how the properties were assessed. Under tax court things like this, they could ask, if they're successful, for legal fees and costs. I don't know if they would be successful in getting them, but that's what's being sought. Relief in the form of changing the assessment that attaches to certain properties as farms, and then potentially asking for the costs in bringing the lawsuit if it's successful. That case is still pending. And yes, for those who are asking, this case is Mr. and Mrs. Astor, because they are the owners of 76 Route 24, which is next door. The litigation costs, I did get a question on the issue. Unfortunately, as it's displaying, how much money has the township spent defending the Asdale lawsuits, both directly related to the litigation and due to conflicts and inefficiencies caused by litigation? The answer is we can only provide direct costs. What are we actually out of pocket? Indirect costs, of course, there is no way to measure. We don't track employee time on the work created by this or any other litigation, and there are 3 other lawsuits pending against the township for other things. With regards to the Asdale v. Tester Township, the first case that has been dismissed, the costs were $1,000 for the deductible for the defense through the insurance carrier, plus $2,223.80 for work done by Attorney Sinitsky and Attorney Mike Lavery, who is the attorney for the zoning board and also the conflicts attorney, plus $1,828 for the conflict zoning officer, for a total of just over $5,000 that we are out of pocket related to that suit that has now been dismissed. There was a conflict. Another attorney was hired, Mr. Stephen Gruenberg, because Mr. Szyminski had some conflicts, as did Mr. Lavery, and Mr. Blount, the planning board attorney, as that case developed. They had to recuse themselves. We spent about another $3,200 on Mr. Gruenberg's fees today. With regards to the tax appeal, we've spent about $3,300 for another conflicts attorney, because Mr. Szyminski, who would normally handle the matter, cannot, an attorney by the name of Fred Sem. We also had to hire a conflict tax assessor, Mark Burek. Mr. Burek today has yet to bill us. The conflict tax assessor is because our tax assessor is the one who said the property is farmland. Because of the conflict with Mr. Asdale, Mrs. Asdale suing as mayor, the tax assessor was not comfortable continuing in the matter, and so the council went out and appointed a special tax assessor for Mr. Alstein and Mr. Asdale's situation. So that's it for the mayor's lawsuits. Yes, they are there. Yes, they have cost the money. Those are the facts. If we move on, there are other complaints. This one is a fellow by the name of Pimentel. I read the complaint. I'll post it. Even as a trial attorney, I can't make a lot of sense out of this one. The guy got arrested somewhere on the turnpike and he's suing Chester Township. I'm not sure I understand how or why, but it's there, it's still active. I don't get the sense it's going to go far enough. That's why you'll see we're in the case with Mount Olive, Morris County, and Verizon. There is another case, Danielson. This is in federal court. An interesting caption because they don't even use the rest of the guy's name. It's just Danielson. His name is Harold Danielson. There was an issue about him being restrained in a particular event and removed because he got too rowdy, and the police chief, he alleges, was too rough in the process of removing him. That case is still pending. Both of these cases are being defended by insurance-appointed attorneys covered under the insurance. There's another one. Denise Stanford. Denise was a former secretary in the police department. She alleges that she was discriminated against on the basis of age and terminated. That case is still going. I'm not involved, nor is the council directly involved in these cases. From time to time, we will get reports. If decisions need to be made on strategy issues, we're the body that would make the decision, but by and large, those cases just sort of take on their own life and proceed accordingly. So that's all that I have on lawsuits. Those are all the lawsuits that are presently pending against the township.